Welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast, your Disney infotainment podcast. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast at all times and get ready for the Disney Parks Podcast.
All right, welcome to the show. We have an awesome show for you. We have a great guest. Our guest is Dave Bossert, someone who has spent his life blending creativity, innovation, and a deep love for storytelling. He started in a place I was born, Massapequa, New York. I was born down the road in Seaford, and working for the Disney company, doing animation of all sorts and all things Disney animation. So he's got a lot of stories he's going to tell us. But now he's kind of shifted gears. He's now doing animation and doing some storytelling and writing. So he's flipped the creativity gear. So looking forward to hearing from him. Dave, welcome to the show. I'm sure you got some great stories you're going to tell.
Anthony, it's great to be with you. Do you like Anthony or Tony, or what do you go by?
Tony's good. Because if somebody calls me
Tony.
Anthony, it's usually my mother, and she's screaming at me.
There you go. And by the way, my middle name is Anthony.
Well, there you go. Fantastic.
Yeah, so Tony, it's great to be with you on the Disney Parks podcast. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah. And so, all right, let's start with Massapequa. How long did you live in Massapequa, New York?
You know, I moved to Well, first off, I was born in Astoria, Queens.
Okay.
So right. I lived in Astoria for about a year, and then my parents bought the house out in Massapequa, and we moved out there. So I spent, basically most of my life
really?
up until I was about 19.
Wow.
Living in Massapequa, and then from there. Moved out to Los Angeles to go to California Institute of the Arts.
Wow. How did you lose the New York accent? Because you don't have one.
Well, it's really funny. I have to tell you, Tony, it's really funny because I don't think I have much of an accent, but people out here will pick up on it on certain words. Certain words. Like if I say coffee or four. So there's a little bit of a little bit of a lazy, speech on those words. Right. But when I go back to New York, which I do every year, at least once or twice, I always think to myself, did I really have that kind of a thick New York accent? But I don't know.
Yeah. All right, so let's start. How did your journey really with Disney begin? Like, how did you wake up and go, hey, you know what? I want to go work for the Disney animation company. That sounds like
look, like most of my contemporaries who I've worked with in the industry, I had a love for animation growing up. I liked stop motion animation. I loved animated cartoons on Saturday morning, those types of things. I remember, and you might remember, afternoon shows like Officer Joe Bolton. And he would show the Popeye cartoons and, Romper Room and, some of those regional shows that were on television way back when. And, so I always liked animation. I always felt like I was going to go into a career in art. My dad was in the advertising and marketing business in New York City.
Oh wow!
And so I growing up, I would meet art directors he worked with on ad campaigns and promotional things and stuff like that. So I was always being exposed to it. And so when I graduated high school, and by the way, when I was in high school, I took every art class that was offered. Then that was back when they actually had art classes in schools, and I had a really great high school art teacher, Mr. Hanslick. Conrad Hanslick was an accomplished artist himself. I mean, he had gallery shows on Long Island and stuff like that. So he knew immediately when I was in, when I first met him and was in his classes, he knew I was interested in going into art as a career.
Right.
And so he gave me a little extra attention because a lot of kids took the art classes for the free, the easy credit,
Sure. Yeah.
and, whether it was an elective credit or something like that. But he really nurtured me, and I always appreciated that. And so from there, I actually went to the State University of New York at Farmingdale because they had a
Hmm.
really great advertising art program.
Hmm.
So when I graduated high school, that's where I started taking. I went into that program, and it was while I was taking that program, I did a TV graphics class,
Oh wow.
and and it was the first time I really created some flat two-dimensional animation, very
Hmm.
rudimentary stuff
Hmm.
for TV graphics. And right around that time, somebody handed me, it was a friend, handed me an article out of the New York Times about Disney training the next generation at Cal Arts. And I read that article. It was the first time I heard about California Institute of the Arts, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll send my portfolio out and
Yeah.
see if I can get in. And they only accepted 30 students. They still do. They only accept 30 students a year into the
Wow.
animation program. And back then there were very few animation programs. You had Sheridan College up in Toronto had an
Hmm.
animation program, and you had School of Visual Arts in New York City that had some animation program. And I think Ralph Bakshi is a product of School of Visual Arts.
Right.
But there wasn't as many animation programs as there are today.
Okay.
There seems like you could find an animation program, in just about any state in the country. And so, I always laugh about this, but I had to box up a big black portfolio case
Right.
and send it UPS out to Valencia, California, where Cal Arts is. And I was shocked because I actually I got accepted first time through, and I wound up getting a Walt Disney scholarship,
Oh wow.
partial scholarship to go to Cal Arts. So I decided to stop the advertising program. I had done 3 semesters, and so I dropped out of the program, and I worked full time for about 8 months in 1980.
Wow.
Uh, and by the way, I was working on an early solar energy project at Brookhaven National Laboratories, if you remember where that is, out on the
Yeah.
east end of Long Island.
Yeah. Sure.
So so um, so I did that and saved up as much money as I could, and I loaded up my Volkswagen Beetle and I drove to Los Angeles. And it was crazy. And I did the program, and it was a great program from the standpoint that there was a lot of retired artists that they pulled out of retirement to teach at Cal
Yeah.
Arts. So I had people like Jack Hanna
Hmm.
was the head of the program, and
Wow.
Jack Hanna had directed a lot of Donald Duck cartoons. He was a story artist, a
Yeah.
director. In fact, I think he directed most of the Chippendale cartoons at the
Really.
studio. Yeah, so they asked him to come out of retirement to head up the program, and then there was T. He.
Hmm.
Was great caricature artist. He was teaching Elmer Plummer, who did character designs for Fantasia and
Hmm.
other films at the studio. He was my life drawing teacher. Ken O'Connor was there doing layout and background. There was Bob McCrae. Jules Engel
Hmm.
who was one of the guys that started UPA cartoons in the 50s.
Right.
He had worked at Disney. He was heading up the experimental animation program. So there was a lot of really incredible
Yeah.
instructors
Right.
that were in the program. So I wound up doing the 4 year program in 3 years, and I got I got my degree. Well, pretty much got my degree. I'll put it down. I'll preface that. I was
We'll
short.
say you have one.
I was short one class,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just sort of an aside. I was short one class, and you fast forward about 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm asked to become a trustee of CalArts. And I in the interim, I had gone to UCLA for a
Right.
number of years, taking a lot of business classes and things like that. So I was like, wow, if I accept this position as a trustee, I really should be a graduate, like an official, like have a degree from the school, right? Not that it really mattered so much,
Yeah.
but for that, I kind of felt like I needed to do it. So I called the registrar's office at CalArts
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Hey, I was short one class, and I've taken all of these classes, and I can send you my transcript from UCLA. Do you think I could get my degree?" And
Mm-hmm.
they got the transcript, and they're like, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." They gave me my degree. And ever since, I mean, literally for I think 22 years now, I've been a trustee
Oh wow, that's
on the board of
fantastic.
trustees at CalArts. But anyway, that was just sort of an aside. So I did the program in 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I graduated, and I got a job pretty much right away at Don Bluth Productions
Oh sure. Yeah.
when they had their studio in Studio City, California, and
Rival.
they
Right.
were working. Yeah, well, it was sort of before they did An American Tale.
Mm.
They were working on some early. It was after they had done Secret of Nim,
Okay.
but before they started doing another feature, and they were doing some early video games. One was called Space Ace, and the other was called Dragon's Lair.
Okay.
And anyway, I wound up getting a job there, and I worked there, I want to say, for 7 or 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
and or 10 months, something like that. Until one day they had this big crew meeting in the parking lot, and Don Bluth said, "Hey, we've run out of money. We're shuttering the studio." They went bankrupt.
Wow.
And right around that time, I had some friends working at Disney, but a good friend of mine, Jeff, said, "Hey, they're looking for some effects artists for Black Cauldron, which was in
Oh
production."
yeah.
And so I just sent my book over to Don Hahn,
Mm-hmm.
who's the production manager,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a call saying, "Hey, yeah, we'd like to hire you and bring you in."
Right.
So I think I might have been out of work for a month.
That's not
And
bad.
then I graduated from CalArts in May of '83, and I started working at Disney in May of '84.
Right.
And then I just, I worked as, look, I viewed it as I was the last guy hired, I'd be the first guy fired, was my mentality. And so I just went in every day and I worked whatever overtime they authorized. I
Mm.
worked as much as possible,
Yeah.
and I just banked as much money as possible, figuring, okay, at the end of Black Cauldron, I'll get laid off,
Right. Yeah.
and so by the time we finished production on Black Cauldron, they started handing out the pink slips.
Right.
And I was seeing all these people getting laid off. There were 28 people in the effects department,
Mm.
and they laid off 16.
Wow. Like
So it
whole
was like
staff.
two
Yeah.
two two-thirds of the department
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
got whacked.
Right.
And so every
That's
day
a
I
New
went
York
in.
phrase to get laid
Yeah,
off.
got
Get whacked.
whacked. Got whacked. so so uh so I was coming in every day, and I had a great attitude
Yeah.
because I was expecting it, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
And so every day I'd come in, and every week there was, more people were being let go because they were finishing off the work that they were doing. And I kept working, and I kept thinking to myself, well, at some point they're going to lay me off. So finally I went to Don Hahn's office,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked him if he could give me an idea when they were going to lay me off, just so I could plan,
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, I was working so much. Like my first week on Black Cauldron, I worked 6 days.
Wow.
And so I was doing all this overtime, and I
Yeah.
was making, at the time for me as a single guy, I was
Yeah.
making a lot
Sure.
of money,
Yeah.
but I was banking it all because all I was doing was working and sleeping.
Right.
And I didn't really, I wasn't going out and spending the money. So I just kept banking it all. And I was living with a buddy from New York who had come out to Los Angeles, and we were splitting an apartment
Hmm.
on the Marina Peninsula,
Okay.
just south of Venice Beach. And so we were like a stone's throw from the sand.
Right.
And so, I had it in my mind that when I finished all this overtime, I was going to take the summer off and just hang at the beach in California and just enjoy myself, and then figure out what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And so I went into Don Hahn, and I said, can you give me some kind of idea when so I can plan ahead? And he kind of paused, and he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, we're not laying you off." And I
Wow.
must have done like a Tex Avery take with my jaw hitting the floor and my eyes bugging out of my head, because I was shocked, and and the only thing I could say, as I recall it anyway, was, well, do you think I could take some time off? And he was like, sure, absolutely, that won't be a problem. But
I've
so
been here
I
every day
was
since I started. I'd like to.
well, it went from 6 days a week. I think it
Hmm.
was like 5 or 6 months of 6 days a week,
Yeah.
and then I went to 7 days a week,
Wow. Yeah.
and I was kind of consistently working the 7 days a week, with the odd day here and weekend day here and there
Mm.
where I didn't work, but you know, I was getting, paid, time and a half,
Yeah.
double time, so
Right.
it was nice. But when I was really literally one of the, I worked on one of the last scenes to get
Mm.
finished in the effects department,
Okay.
on Black Cauldron, and it was a scene that really, what I think, one of the most talented effects animators during the Renaissance, Jeff Howard,
Okay.
was the animator, and I was assisting him. And it was one of the last scenes we finished off, and he ultimately left the studio, but I stayed on. And one of the things they asked me to do, if because they didn't have a lot for me to do, they asked if I'd be willing to jump into ink and paint and help
Mm.
out with painting cells for the movie
Yeah.
to help get it finished. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And it was really the best education I got in the animation business
Sure.
early on, because I learned the entire Disney animation pipeline.
Right.
Right. So, when the character animation gets finished, it goes to the effects department, the effects are added to the scene, then it goes into animation check,
Mm.
then, from animation check, it went into, ink and paint and final check and camera. And, and I'm kind of glossing over it a little
Yeah.
bit
Sure.
here,
Right.
just for the purposes of, just cutting to the chase. And so I really learned a tremendous amount for the couple months that I helped paint cells. And I was in a unit that was headed by a woman named Karen Camella,
Hmm.
who was really terrific, very patient with me. But they gave me a lot of the effects to paint,
Okay.
which was more intricate, and and again, it gave me a much clearer understanding of what you do in one department, how it ripples through all these other
Right.
departments and how it affects them.
Yeah.
So anyway, after I did that, the movie came out. There was a big management change out at the studio, and I went on to the next picture, which was Great Mouse Detective, and I got bumped up to an animator, effects animator,
Hmm.
and I had the same attitude on Great Mouse Detective, because it was sort of like, okay, well, I didn't get laid off on Black Cauldron, but I'll definitely get laid off at the end of this picture, you know. And I think I worked on like 5 pictures at the studio with that mentality of,
Right.
oh, okay, I'm going to get laid off at the
Yeah.
end of this one.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I kind of settled in and realized I wasn't going to get laid off. And I had a very robust career and spent almost 33 years working there consistently without any layoffs, which was nice.
Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about what a special effects person does on animation.
Well,
Just kind of give us an idea.
yeah, I used to tell people that, what I did was I did anything that animated outside of the character or
Okay.
background elements,
Okay.
right? So any kind of environmental effects,
Hmm.
rounding up characters, lighting,
Right.
mud, water,
Right.
bubbles. I mean, bubbles out the wazoo on Little Mermaid. So it was, that type of work plus all the camera effects. So it's
Oh.
not just drawing, but it's also understanding camera and being able to use live action elements that you're
Hmm.
exposing into scenes. Because you look at a film like, say, The Black Cauldron, and there's not only hand drawn animated effects, there's live action effects that are layered in. There's the Black Cauldron has the first computer animated effects elements ever done in a Disney animated film.
Wow.
So that was basically the type of work that I specialized in early in my career.
Yeah. And when you started, I guess it would have been Ron Miller and Roy would have been running
Yeah, yeah.
animation back
So
then.
when I started, Ron Miller was president of the company,
Hmm.
and you had Roy, who was on the board of directors. But while I was there, Roy resigned from the board.
Okay.
There was sort of a takeover battle happening.
Mm.
Again, this was my, I read the papers. I knew what was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
There was a guy named Saul Steinberg, who
Yeah.
was a financier from Wall Street,
Hmm.
he thought the Walt Disney Company was more valuable sold off in pieces than
Right.
it was as a whole company. And Roy decided to resign from the board and work on the outside to save the company.
Yeah.
And he brought in the Bass brothers of
Hmm.
Texas as sort
Yep.
of white knights to buy up stock, and ultimately they sort of paid off Saul Steinberg, so he walked away with a big profit on his stake in the company,
Yeah.
and then engineered having a new management team come in to breathe life into the company, which forced Ron Miller out and created a rift in the Disney family between
Mm.
the Walt side of the family and the Roy side of the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it was really sort of a very tumultuous time,
Yeah.
and Black Cauldron didn't really get its due because it was released under the new management regime that
Hmm.
looked at it as, well, that wasn't our picture.
Yeah.
And we would have done it differently. So they didn't really put a lot behind it. And I think Black Cauldron has become a little bit of a cult film.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's got a big fan base as far as I could tell.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I guess Eisner came in right after that, probably, and Katzenberg. And what was it? You must have done films under Jeffrey and Michael. What was that like? Um, I mean,
Well,
all I know
I
is
think
from the books I read
yeah,
that
yeah.
they're a little
Look, I
crazy.
mean, initially, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg came in for Paramount. They brought a
Hmm.
lot of people in from
Yeah.
the film industry. You had Frank Wells,
Right.
who was a college buddy of Roy E. Disney's
Hmm.
and was from Warner Brothers. He
Yep.
was an executive at Warner Brothers, and so originally it was going to be uh, Frank Wells as the CEO and Michael as president, but Michael
Mm.
refused to do it unless he was the CEO, and Frank didn't care and acquiesced.
Right.
So Frank became president. But I think what the initial thought was they were going to shutter the animation department at Disney because they didn't understand animation, and
Yeah.
it was losing money.
Hmm.
They were carrying this crew of people,
Right.
and Roy, Roy became the chairman of Walt Disney Animation Studios and really was the champion for the studio. He was okay with moving the animation department off the studio lot to
Hmm.
some building, to one building initially over by Imagineering in Glendale,
Right.
and then the original animation building that I had worked in on the studio lot, they flooded in all of these people from film and TV with
Mm.
production deals and stuff like that. And look, they really resurrected a sleeping giant,
Sure.
and you
Yeah.
have to give them the credit that they're due. And I think that you also have to give Roy credit for saving the animation department and really being one of the people that ignited the renaissance of Disney animation.
Right.
And so it really became an exciting time because we wound up going on to do, Little Mermaid and, Rescuers Down Under and
Yeah.
Oliver and Company and
Beauty and the
Beauty and the
Beast,
Beast,
Aladdin, Lion
Aladdin,
King. Yeah.
Lion King, Pocahontas, Hercules,
Yeah.
I mean, Hunchback. It just,
Right.
it goes on and on. So that whole period from the late 80s all the way through the 90s into the early 2000s was just explosive growth.
Yeah.
And, they wanted to, increase output of
Hmm.
animation. They got star power in to do voices.
Right.
There was a lot of that kind of stuff that I think was really good. And there was other things that were, chafed at the artists, because it
Mhm.
was like more, better, faster, cheaper, kind
Right.
of attitude and things like that. But that whole period really, expanded the company's footprint in the business, not only in animation but live action, and really breathed a lot of new life into the park system.
Yeah. So I get, we debate this thing, with friends of mine. Do you think that, something changed story wise? Like, did Disney get better at telling these stories like Lion King, Little Mermaid? Or was it that with the combination of, the music with Ashman and Menken that really brought, the music alive? Or was it just that combination? Do you think it was one, the other, or combination of,
I personally think it was a combination of
yeah,
both. But I mean,
yeah.
Alan Menken and Howard Ashman
Hmm.
really brought musical theater to the screen in
Yeah.
animation.
Okay.
And it started with Little Mermaid. I like to say that the renaissance of animation, of Disney animation,
Hmm.
started with Who Framed Roger Rabbit
Hmm.
and with The Little Mermaid. And I would also throw into it An American Tail, which was Spielberg and Bluth, right?
Right.
So that
Right.
wasn't Disney, but so there was this renaissance in animation, and there
Sure.
was a renaissance of Disney animation that happened in that late 80s period.
Hmm.
And 88 was, I'm trying to think of if American Tail was 87, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was 88. Maybe you could
Hmm.
check that while I'm
Yeah.
just talking. But
Right.
American Tail did really well. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a big hit, and then The Little Mermaid, had made the most money of an animated film in the initial release at that point when it came out.
Right.
And so those three films, to me, were the ignition point of this big renaissance in animation that happened.
Right. Yeah. So Roger Rabbit came out in '88.
Right.
Uh,
And American Tail was
let's say American Tail.
87 or 88.
86.
Oh, 86.
86.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was off.
Yeah.
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 So, anyway, I mean, the point being is that, I think that there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of, uh, just, interesting stories. They were looking at allowing people to pitch ideas. It was a very exciting time, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the company and for animation during that period.
Right.
But all good things come to an end. I could tell in the late '90s that the party was going to end well
Mm,
before it did.
yeah.
But it's sort of, you have to have a pulse on what's going on in the industry you're involved with,
Right.
uh, and be able to see things that really other people aren't seeing. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but I had a great run, and I like to say my swan song on the feature side was Fantasia 2000,
Which is
which
celebrating an anniversary,
yeah,
right?
yeah, just this past January celebrated the 25th anniversary of the
Wow.
film.
That's
And
crazy.
I spent a number of years working on that picture as a visual effects supervisor and artistic coordinator,
Hmm.
and very proud of that picture. And after I finished that, I really didn't see anything on the horizon that was
Mm.
exciting me. And Tom Schumacher was president of Disney Animation at the time, and he asked me to start, to work on some small projects that were coming in from different aspects of the company,
Okay.
and that's really sort of how I got involved with the special projects, and ultimately became, a producer and head of special projects at Walt Disney Animation Studios, and worked on a lot of attractions all around the park system,
Yeah.
including World of Color at California Adventure, the Little
Right.
Mermaid ride at California Adventure, um, the revamp of the Alice in Wonderland attraction,
Oh wow.
uh, the Paris Dreams outdoor spectacular in Paris, the Once Upon a Time show in Tokyo, the Dwarf Mine Coaster. I mean, I could just
Hmm.
keep going on. We did shows for the cruise lines.
Right.
It was a very exciting period for me because I got to work on everything from, supplying a still image to a partner in the company, to supplying reused animation for Dancing with the Stars on ABC when they did their Disney Night
Yeah.
special, and stage shows, Broadway projects all over the world,
Right.
and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think I was reading that you did the safety. Uh, I don't know what they're not movies, but
Oh,
for the
yeah.
cast
So I,
members.
yeah. So well, I produced and directed. Are you talking about the Safety Smart?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Wild About Safety, Safety
Right.
Smart films. We did 8 of those. I produced and
Mm.
directed those. It was a partner Disney and the Underwriters Laboratories. And actually,
Okay.
it's funny you mentioned that because I still get emails periodically, at least a couple times a year, from people that just send me a random note saying, I was just down at Walt Disney World, and my kids have been watching these Safety Smart films, on the Resort Channel. I think they have one channel devoted to playing those films,
Wow.
continuously
Yeah.
at the resorts. Somebody sent me a note from Paris. It's like all the resorts around the world play the Safety Smart films
Yeah.
on one of the channels, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. That's funny. All right. So, do you have like in your animation? Do you have like a specific project that goes? It was really like I love doing this. If I could have done it again, something that really sticks out that you have a really fond memory. Um.
Well, you're the first person really that's asked me the question that way, because usually people say to me, "What's your favorite movie that you worked
Yeah.
on?"
No.
And I always sit there and say, you can't pick one, because it's like trying to pick who your favorite child is. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every one of the films I worked on holds special memories.
Sure.
There's things I learned that were new,
Hmm.
but the film that bubbles to the surface from an experience standpoint is Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
Right.
because I got to live in London and
Oh,
work on that picture. And I was only one of like 4 or 5 or 6 Americans that were part of that London crew.
hmm,
Everybody else was international. They were from all over Europe and South America and Asia. So we had this very international crew of people. And my experience, not only working on the picture, but also just living in London and having friends that weren't involved in animation
yeah.
that I had met through some mutual friends. They were in the banking industry and
Hmm.
expat Australians that were working, in the banking business. I had such a great time because again, after finishing that film, uh, you have friends that are all over the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
and people I keep in touch with to this day, you
Right.
know.
Right. So, all right, I'm going to ask you to verify or deny this myth. There's a myth, culture myth,
Okay.
that in Roger Rabbit, when Roger crashes into the billboard, I think it's towards the end of the film, allegedly, originally, some animator put Michael Eisner's home number on that billboard. And then later on, when the VHS came out, it was taken off. It was changed.
Something uh,
I've heard
that
this so
that
many times.
I can't verify or deny that because
So it wasn't
honestly
you,
I
Dave.
hadn't heard that one. It wasn't me, but I will tell you that in Runaway Brain, which I think is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year,
Right.
Runaway Brain, there's actually a pink slip with JK initials on it, and it was during when Jeffrey left Disney. We put his pink slip into a shot, and you can
Right.
clearly see the JK for one frame.
Yeah.
That's it, one frame, and then
Right.
it sort of whisked off.
Yeah.
That's in the cartoon, and you could see that.
Right. That's
Uh,
funny.
but something, when you talk about that kind of stuff, a lot of
Hmm.
it is tongue in cheek,
Yeah.
inside jokes, and
Sure.
it's kind of innocuous. It's
Yeah.
not really harmful.
Right.
There's just funny things. They're like Easter eggs that
Yeah.
people can look for if they
Right.
find out about them.
Right. Right.
And that was always kind of a fun thing. I mean, every once in a while, there was somebody who would do something that was inappropriate, and
Hmm.
you'd have to, it kind of ruins it for everyone else,
Yeah.
because then they would clamp down on any kind of little inside things or Easter eggs that you would try and
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, you know, uh, where do you see animation going? Like, we know, is technology, is AI going to, really catapult animation maybe into the next era? I mean, where do you see it going, Dave? I
you,
mean,
you
you've
know,
been doing it for a long time.
yeah, I mean, Tony, when I sit here and see new things come along,
Yeah.
I was in the animation, I've been in the animation business from when it was strictly just hand drawn
Right.
all the way through the transition to CG,
Mm.
right? And as the computer technology was being developed, I embraced it
Yeah.
because it was another tool. And I worked on the precursor to Maya, Power Animator. I
Mm.
got trained in that. I worked in Maya, worked in Houdini. Not proficient by any sense of the imagination, but was able to do enough to understand it as I was moving up the ladder,
Right.
and be able to supervise people that were using these software packages. So, from my perspective, AI today is going to be the same thing as computer technology coming in. You
Right.
know,
Right.
um, there's a lot of people who thought, "Wow, the computer's going to replace people, and it's
Mm.
going to make the films cost a lot less." It did the opposite. It required them to hire more people and to train people onto the software that wanted to be trained, and ultimately the films have cost more to
Hmm.
do than they did traditionally.
Right.
I think the same thing's going to probably wind up happening with AI, because some people are afraid of AI, thinking, "Oh my God, some executive is just going to be able to type in a prompt, create a scene for me with X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and some software program is going to be able to do it, Mid
Hmm.
Journey or something, will be able to do it." I just don't buy that. I think that it will help to allow people to be more productive.
Right.
If you can imagine a visual development artist doing a painting and then putting that painting into a program like Midjourney or one of the others, and saying, take my painting and do it in 10 different styles,
Right.
when they're trying to work out the look of a movie, right?
Yeah. Right.
So it'll help people be more productive. But the idea of some Lex Luthor executive sitting in an office, saying, write me a rom-com script that'll be a hit,
Right. Yeah.
and having an AI program do it, I just don't buy into that, because I don't think the technology is there. I don't think it'll even be there in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And also, art is art. Art is created by human beings,
Yeah.
that have emotions and put their passion and skills and talents into whatever it is they're doing, their imagination, all of those things. You can't just replicate that in an AI program.
Yeah.
The AI programs scrape. They go out and they take all the different art styles that are out there, and
Hmm.
then they're just homogenizing it and
Sure.
using it,
Yeah.
and in some instances using it illegally.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
you know so I'm not afraid of AI. I think
Yeah.
AI is another tool for artists to use, but
Sure.
I do think that we are going into a period where I am hearing from a lot of people, especially older artists that have
Mm.
been in the business for decades, who are not, their phone isn't ringing, they're not
Mm.
getting the work that they used to get. One could argue, is that a little bit of ageism,
Sure.
or are they using some of these software programs to generate stuff? And by the way, you consume content. You know as well as I do, there's a lot of crap being made,
Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah.
and they're passing it off as being, you know, as being some great show, and you look at it and it's terrible. It
Yeah.
looks terrible. The writing is terrible. It's not funny.
Right.
I see that kind of stuff all the time, and some of these streaming operations were paying big money for that.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a transition period right now. I think that the entire business is going on to a new footing, and they're trying to
Mm.
find their sea legs for it,
Yeah.
and how it's going to work. But I think that if you want to be in this business, it's always going to boil down to talent.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you don't have the talent, you're not going to be able to cut it. You're not going to have a robust career.
Right.
And that's really what it boils down to. And I think we're ripe for a bit of a shakeout, because
Mm.
in the last 30 years or so, there's been so many animation programs that have popped up all over the country. And
Yeah.
every one of those programs is churning out people every year. And I could tell you from seeing some of the portfolios, they're doing a disservice to these people.
Yeah.
They're just putting warm bodies in seats and taking their money.
Right.
And at the end of a 4-year program, some of these people don't even have a portfolio that I would even consider to be rudimentary for acceptance into a program.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So getting back to the AI question, it's another tool for people.
Yeah.
It'll find its usefulness, and it will make people more productive. But will it replace people?
I
Maybe,
don't think so.
maybe it will, but Jeffrey Katzenberg made a comment that 90% of animation jobs will be replaced by AI. I don't believe that.
I
I
don't
mean,
either.
I just don't believe it,
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I will say that many of the animation studios are spending too much money on animated films. They're just
mm,
spending way too much money on them, and I think at some point that has to change.
yeah,
They're too expensive. When Disney spends 200 million plus another 50 million for marketing on a film like Strange World or Wish,
yeah,
and they completely do a face plant
yeah,
at the box office,
yeah.
there's something wrong.
Right.
Those films should not cost that kind of money.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't. And then you see a film like Leonardo, which was a stop motion film
Hmm.
that Jim Capabianco directed, and it was a beautifully done movie. It had a heart to it. They made the movie for like $8 or $10 million.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they didn't have the marketing money to really get it
Mm.
out into the world, but if they had the marketing money to do
Sure.
it, I think it would have done a lot better. But again, there's a problem with too much money being spent on these films. And are some of these animation studios, are they software companies in disguise?
Mm.
Because
Right.
some of them have, they have an army of software engineers, and,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, do you really need to at this point constantly be writing new software?
Yeah. Right.
Because then the stuff you did on one movie can't be used two movies ahead.
Right.
They because you got a software engineer say, oh, that crowd software, I can write something better, and they write
Right.
something new, and
Yeah.
then you can't repurpose some of this stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
and when I say repurpose it for the park system or for other uses,
Yeah.
which we were always able to do with some of the stuff we did in the 1990s.
Right. Yeah. I always heard like at Pixar when they were doing a film, something new had to get developed. If it was monsters, it was hair, or if it was Dory, it was water. Every film had some challenge, some rewrite of
Yeah,
software, for it to get done. So,
yeah,
uh,
but that you got to realize those were films that were being done during the development of
yeah.
CG animation,
Right.
and some people would argue, well, it's still developing. Well, you know what? Go out and look at all these films and what they're
Yeah.
able to do. How much do you really need to keep reinventing? You
Right.
know,
Right.
and the amount of money they're spending on that, I'd prefer to see them spend it on story, because there's an awful
Hmm.
lot of these that are coming out, and the stories are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
look, you look at Moana, for example.
Hmm.
Moana, the first one, is a great movie.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
really well done film, right? The second one doesn't have a heart to it.
No.
It just doesn't have a heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
It's sort of like the characters are just going through the motions,
Yeah.
and that's it.
And I,
And
I I said to
maybe
my girlfriend too. I said I didn't walk out singing any of those songs like I did the first one. First one I was
right.
singing like all the songs walking out of the theater, like you're welcome,
Yeah.
And this was like what nothing.
Yeah,
So
Spellbound, which came
mhm.
out of Skydance Animation through Netflix. I
Mm,
mean, you watch that movie start to finish, and you shrug,
yeah,
and the songs, and by the way, the songs are done by Alan Menken, but they're not memorable songs.
right, right, yeah, yeah,
And the story is, a lot of these animated films that are coming out today feel derivative of other things.
right, yeah,
It's sort
yeah,
of like you watch them and you're like, well, I've kind of seen this before,
yeah. And that's how I
and
feel about Disney's live action things. I'm like, do have we run out of stories that we have to take the animated and turn it into a live action? And when they say live action for something like Mufasa, then nothing is alive in that movie. It's all CGI, except for the
right,
person doing the voice. That was the live part.
yeah.
So, I mean, it looks
But
realistic. Yes.
Yeah, but still, I don't think the animation is as good as it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially some shots where it just it didn't work. But if you look at last year's crop of films, a lot of them just blend from one to another. They all kind of
Mm.
have the same look to them, same feel to them. There's nothing
Yeah.
inventive about it
Right.
until you get to a film like The Wild Robot.
Yes.
And The Wild Robot to me is a beautiful movie. It has a beautiful
I agree.
environments. It's got a story that has a heart to it. It's got
Yep.
characters that are likable. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it ticks all the boxes, and I think that
Yes.
The Wild Robot is probably one of the best animated films to come out. Well, first and foremost, it's best animated film for me in
Yeah.
2024,
Yeah.
but it's really one of the best movies come out in a while.
Yeah.
And that was directed and written by Chris Saunders,
Mm-hmm.
who worked at Disney and did Lilo and Stitch, and then he went over. He did Lilo and Stitch, and I think Bolt at
Okay.
Disney, and then he did How to Train Your Dragon at DreamWorks,
Right.
and now he's got The Wild Robot, and I think Wild Robot. I hope it wins the Academy Award for Best Animated Picture.
Yeah.
And speaking of Academy Awards, this is the third year in a row that Disney Animation hasn't gotten nominated for
Wow.
a feature film, and I
That's
think that's
sad.
a shame. It's a
Yeah.
shame because Disney Animation was the gold standard of animation.
Yeah.
It was the gold standard, and honestly, I think they've faltered in recent years.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of that has to do with story.
Mm.
I think the real focus should be on story and less so on the technology.
Right.
The software is there to do what you need it to do.
Right.
You don't have to keep rewriting stuff. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Your
and
IT
and
department shouldn't be bigger than your creative department.
exactly. So
Then you're misappropriating money. Let's flip the gear and talk about now your writing career. That you have a whole book brand, Old Mill Press, correct?
well, yes, I have an interest in it. I'll put it
Okay.
to you that way.
Okay. So how did you go? Okay. I'm done with animation, kind of creative. Now I'm going to flip my gear and I'm going to start, pumping out books because they're
Well,
great
something.
books.
Thank you. And for me, I would say my career is always evolving,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, towards the mid to late '90s, I could see that the party was going to end
Right.
uh, at animation at some point, and it wound up being like 2003 to 2004, somewhere in there, 2005, where they really made the decision to switch from hand drawn to computer generated.
Yeah.
um, and and I kind of felt like I had done everything I wanted to do in animation, in feature animation,
Right.
as far as pictures go. After I finished Fantasia 2000, so shifting into doing the special projects was really again kept me challenged on a regular basis with new projects. I was involved in doing R&D on stuff with the Imagineers. In fact, I have a honorary Imagineers hard hat somewhere here
Ooh.
in my office. You know, so that was really exciting. And then after doing some 600 projects over 15 years or something like that, um, uh, I got again. It was a suggestion from Don Hahn that I put a collection of stories that I had about Roy Disney, because I got to know Roy very well while I was working on Fantasia 2000, and then I worked on Destino, which he wanted to complete as part of really I think the family history, the company's history.
Right.
And so I became friends with Roy. So after Roy passed away, Don made the suggestion that I put a lot of the stories I had about Roy into a book.
Right.
And that was my first book, Remembering Roy E. Disney.
Yeah. Which I have.
And yeah, and I will say that, you know, when I finished that manuscript, I pitched the idea of doing Destino, and Disney
Mm.
Publishing said, "Yeah, absolutely, let's do Destino." And and at that point, I realized, you know what, I should really improve my writing skills.
Mm.
And I went into the UCLA writers program at night while I was working at the studio,
Oh wow.
and I did a certificate in creative writing and a certificate in fiction writing.
Mhm.
And then I just continued. Every time I finished the manuscript, I had an idea for another book, and I pitched it, and they said, "Oh yeah, let's do that." Until they said they didn't want to do one of them, and then I went and did that anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm enjoying the fact that I get to pick topics that really
Mm.
haven't been written about, and I can, you know, have a hand in putting together, you know, beautiful books, and that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
And you know, and ultimately, you know, when I left the studio, it was just the right time for me to leave. You
Right.
know,
Right.
and in fact, I've had a number of friends say to me, you know, now in hindsight, like, you left at the perfect time.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and I kind of feel like I did, because it was the right time for me.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the company's, you know, kind of lost its way a little bit over the last, you know, 8 or 10 years,
Mm.
in some of the things that they've been doing, and you
Yeah.
know, some of the, you know, I don't need to rehash it, because
No.
we're, you know, if you're a fan of the company, you know all
You
the
know.
missteps that have happened. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so I'm happy just, you know, researching and writing books, and I have my finger in a lot of other things. I go out and speak, and you know, I've got some animation projects I'm involved with, and things like that. So, you know, from that perspective, I'm a much happier individual, and I have a lot less pressure,
Right.
because I'm in a position where I just pick and choose the things I want to do.
Right. Um, Talk a little bit. Let's see if we have some. Just give us a high level overview of the Kem Weber book, because uh, when I first thought, I was like, "This is a book about a desk."
Yeah,
What
well, you
Dave
know,
is going to tell us about a desk that we don't
yeah,
already know?
but it's not just a desk.
I
It's
know.
22 pieces of furniture,
Yeah.
and so I was actually sitting here where I'm
Hmm.
talking to you.
Hmm.
I am on my computer is on a 1939 Kem Weber compact animator's desk,
Wow.
which I have been working on now for probably 35 years.
Right.
And when I left the company, they were very kind and gave me my desk and had it
Wow.
moved. Had the studio movers take it up to my home office,
Wow.
and this is where I write my books. And
Yeah.
so I was in my office writing Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas book that came out in 2023
Okay.
for Disney editions. And I kind of sat back for a moment, and then you know, again, you know, these are serendipitous moments. I started looking at my Kem Weber desk, and I thought to myself, I wonder if anybody's ever written anything about this Kem Weber furniture. And I wound up blowing the rest of the afternoon researching online
Right.
about, you know, the Kem Weber furniture. And as it turned out, there was one book on Kem Weber, on his whole career,
Oh.
and all the different buildings he designed and
Hmm.
everything. And there was a chapter on the Walt Disney Studios that he designed in Burbank for Walt.
Hmm.
And within that chapter, there was one paragraph on the animation furniture.
Right.
So anyway, long story short, I located Ken Weber's archives. He had donated all of his papers and artwork and everything to a university here in California, and I reached out to them and I made an appointment, and they had pulled a bunch of stuff out for me to see, and I went up and spent a night. It was like an overnight trip
Hmm.
to do it, and and I just you went out and I interviewed people who worked on the different desks that he designed for the various disciplines of
Hmm.
the Disney animation process.
Right.
And I say in my introduction in the book, it's my love letter to the Ken Weber furniture, because this
Yeah.
furniture has a soul to it.
Yeah.
Its form and function. It was
Right.
designed with the input of the artists from those various disciplines.
Yeah.
And anybody who is in animation or is an animation fan should have a copy of this book, in my
Yeah.
opinion, because it gives you a sort of a behind the scenes look at the tools of the trade
Right.
during sort of the golden age and renaissance of Disney animation, and why this furniture is important.
Yeah. Yeah. It occasionally I'll see them for sale still on eBay. I don't know how they're getting on eBay. I guess they're still floating around, or people are passing away and they're
Well,
just selling
well,
them or
no,
whatever.
yeah. I mean, I will tell you that during in the late '90s and early 2000s, they had some warehouse sales at the studio
Oh, okay.
where they sold off the furniture to people who wanted them.
Right.
Usually, our animators and people in the animation business bought them. And so some of those are now starting to come to auction,
Mm.
and I'll tell you, a Weber an original, 1939 batch, these desks will command, 10, $15,000,
Wow.
the airline chair that Ken Weber designed that
Yeah.
Walt bought 300 of. He didn't design them for Disney, but he had designed it before he started working on the Disney studio project.
Right.
He clearly sold 300 of them to Walt because Walt used them as seating in the sweat boxes that were in the main animation building on the studio lot.
Hmm.
So there's just I felt it was important to document it,
Yeah.
and when I pitched the idea to Disney Editions, they just felt it was too niche of a topic, and they wouldn't sell enough. And so I just went off and did it. And the book has won a half a dozen or so book awards.
Right.
It's not only in a hardcover edition, there's a paperback edition of it now,
Hmm.
and it consistently sells.
Yeah. So there you go.
So, there you have it.
Yeah.
It's again, people are plugging in things into spreadsheets to see if they're going to make a profit, and I'm just picking topics based on my love of what I want to write about.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the Claude Coates book is
Yes.
another example. The
Yeah.
Claude Coates book, I pitched that 4 times to Disney Editions. They just kept turning it down. And then it finally said that the sales team doesn't know who Claude Coates is. They wouldn't know how to sell the book, and they think Claude should just be a chapter in a book on Imagineers. And by the way, Claude Coates, consistent seller. It's done
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah. We had you and
So,
his son on the show talking about the
Alan
book.
Coates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you send
yeah.
send Disney Edition a little spreadsheet of the sales just to remind them.
You know what? The problem is that Disney Publishing is a pimple on an elephant's ass, right? The
It is.
elephant
Yeah.
being the
Yeah.
elephant being the Walt Disney Company,
Company.
right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the elephant is the Walt Disney Company. The
Yeah.
publishing group is a pimple on its ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're looking for, they want to just publish books that are going to sell 50 and 100,000 or 500,000 copies.
Yeah.
They're not interested in doing, small run,
Right.
specialty press books
Yeah.
on topics that there's an audience for.
Yeah.
So, that's just the way things are,
Yeah.
And for me, I'm just going to write on the topics I'm
Right.
interested in, and I know there's an audience for it.
Right.
So
Uh, Tell us about the new book. I'm pretty sure this is like the last thing. Find Your Happy Place, the 8-step guide to expanding your creativity through a personal retreat.
that's it. It's Find Your Happy Place, the eight
Yeah.
step guide to a personal retreat. Uh, so, this was a book I was never going to write, Tony. I hadn't planned
And here
on
we are.
writing this book, and here we are. So basically, for the last 33, 34 years, I think actually this year will be the 34th year I've been doing it.
Hmm.
I go away by myself for a week or two
Oh,
every year,
fantastic.
consistently, with the exception of 2020 with the pandemic.
Mm.
But every year for the last 34 years, I have taken a week or two for myself to go off by myself, unplug from the electronics,
Hmm.
unplug from television, from media, from everything. I go up to a very remote place in northern Maine,
Hmm.
and I sit in my thoughts. I journal.
Hmm.
I write down my goals for the coming year. I review what I accomplished over the last, the year that passed,
Hmm.
and I think through things that are on my mind, whether it's relationships, friendships, book projects I want to do. The funny thing is, one year I sat at an old weathered picnic table right on the water in Maine on
Hmm.
a sunny day with a college ruled composition notebook, no computer, no devices, and I started writing out a list of books I wanted to write. And I would just kind of put down sort of a loose title of what it was, and then a sentence or two. And I'll tell you right now, I've crossed off like three-quarters of that list, and I keep
Wow.
adding to it now. And to me, the foundation of Find Your Happy Place, the 8-step guide to boosting your creativity through a personal retreat, is doing just that, taking time for yourself
Hmm.
to figure out where you want to be in the next year, what you want to accomplish,
Right.
how you're going to accomplish those things. And I put it into a guide. The book has won a gold medal at the Fire Book Awards in Texas.
Oh,
Uh, and
congratulations.
I've and I've gotten a lot of really great feedback on this book, and it includes, by the way, some worksheets at the end of each chapter, at the end of each step.
Yeah.
I put in some worksheets so people can actually write in what they want to do, and it's also the first audiobook I ever did.
Oh, cool.
I actually do the narration for the audiobook, and the worksheets are available as a PDF
Hmm.
if people get the audiobook.
Right.
But this was a book that was near and dear to my heart. It sells well, especially at shows that I'm at. I've been signing a lot of copies of it, and I'm going to be at the Animation Y'all Expo in Nashville, Tennessee, February 21st to the 23rd, and I'll be signing copies there.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of book that, look. Some people call it a self-help book. I call it a guide to your prosperity. If you're looking to try and get some direction, if you're looking to accomplish a lot of things in the coming year or two. I lay out what I do and how I've, you know, created my success.
Right.
And I've had a very successful career for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So I just decided, because of the pandemic, I wrote the first draft of this.
Right.
So, and it came out this past year. So what was that? 4 years, from
Yeah.
first draft to published book. But I think, again, from all the feedback I've gotten, people have really appreciated the book, and I'm very proud of it. It's really, I think, one of a few non-Disney really books. Even though I do talk about my career a little bit in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. You have to tell people where you were and where you're going.
Yeah,
Gives them some context. Understandable.
exactly.
So what's next for Dave, and where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well,
And
well,
obviously get your books or more.
yeah, people can always reach out to me through my website, davidbossert.com. And I'm in the process of updating the website, but it's up. There's a lot of free content and a lot of stuff I've written about. There's information about my books on that content, on that website. There's also a tab for free stuff.
Mhm.
So if people have one of my books and they'd like to have it signed, they can write to me and I'll send them a book plate they can put in one of my books. So
Oh, cool.
I'm also doing the podcast with Al John Go,
Yes.
the Skull Rock podcast. That's been very successful. We have a weekly show. We interview a lot of animation and just industry professionals on the show. And so we've been having a good time with that. I continue to write. I have multiple book projects in the works, things I'm researching, things I'm finishing writing on. I have a big World War II Disney, Walt Disney World War II book coming up.
Oh, very cool.
I was hoping to actually have it out this year. I'm not sure if we're going to make it by the end of the year, but it'll be out for sure in 2026. And that was heavily researched, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I think the Disney fan base is going to be blown away by. There's images that people have never seen before.
Mm.
There's information people haven't seen before. So I'm excited about that book. And I've got writing projects on the boards that take me out to 2031, 2032. Including, by the way, a rewrite of the Roy E. Disney book, my first book.
Oh, okay.
Because when I wrote that book, I want to tell a full story, and there
Mm.
was a section or two where Disney Publishing came to me and said, "We'd really like you to take that out," and I said, "But it was it's true. It's what happened. Yeah, we know, but." Nonetheless, we'd like you to take that out, and it would be in the best interests of your career if you took it out. So, so, so I want to rewrite that book and put all of the stories in that should be in there,
Right.
I'm going to be able to do that now. So.
Yeah.
Because frankly, I don't care about how it will affect my career now.
You don't want to be looking over your shoulder at night either, though, Dave.
No, I know. So yeah, but there's just I'm so excited because I've got so many different things going on and so
Yeah,
many
cool.
different projects, and I'm working with so many great people. It's just it's just been a ball, and I'd almost say I'm as busy or busier than I was when I was still working at the studio.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
don't think you're probably not the type that will use the word retire. I don't think you're a retire kind of person. You'll have to be
you
doing
know,
something.
Yeah, something. Look, I talk about that in my Find Your Happy Place book.
Yeah.
Retirement really has never been in my vocabulary.
Hmm.
I tell people that you don't retire, you evolve, you change, you
Right.
you move on to some different things. I don't
Yeah.
know what the I'm still so passionate about the stories I'm telling. I'm going to continue to tell those stories, but I'm also I'm doing personal art for I'm doing woodblock printing and
Oh wow.
you know
Very
I,
good.
I'm doing other things that are
Yeah.
creative
Things you want to
outlets for
do.
myself, things that I want to do, things that I'm enjoying.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that the key to a long life is to stay engaged, to
Hmm.
doing something, to keep putting things out on your calendar that you're driving towards, that you're looking forward to. And once you get to that point, putting new things further out.
Right.
I can tell you from personal experience, my mother just turned 94. She
Wow.
still lives in the house I grew up in, on Long Island in Massapequa, and I was just back there this past holiday season, and I took her to get a new car,
Wow.
and I'll just say that, she always has stuff out on her calendar, whether it's going on a vacation, going on a
Right.
cruise, going to visit somebody, this or that.
Right.
She always has stuff she's looking forward to, and she's keeping herself engaged. She pays her bills on an iPad. She's
Fantastic.
94.
That's
She's
great.
94. She's engaged with, social media. Every once in a while, she comments on something I post on Facebook. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. But that's
Yeah.
the key to it,
Yeah.
is to keep yourself engaged and keep doing things that you enjoy doing, and look forward to those things. Set those goals for yourself that you're driving towards,
Yeah.
and when you accomplish a goal, set the next goal. Those are the things you need to do. So that's why retirement is not in my vocabulary, Tony,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it never will be.
Yeah. Reminds me of the Toby Keith song, "Keep the Old Man Out." Right.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah. Don't
I
let the
think
old man in.
I think Clint Eastwood,
Yes.
gets up every day, and that's what he
Hmm.
said.
Says. Yeah.
He says, "I never let the old man
Man
in."
in. Yeah. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time. As always, it's great talking to you. Uh, keep the content rolling because we'll have you back on. We'll talk about more stuff.
absolutely, Tony. I look forward to it. I appreciate you having me on the Disney Parks podcast as always, and I look forward to coming back again in the future.
All right. Thank you.
The Disney Parks podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.